On a regular basis, I do get questions here in the channel as well as on my Facebook and Messenger asking about, well, what about healthcare as an expat living permanently abroad? So I'll go ahead and address several of those items and then give you a plan, because a lot of people will also ask me, well, what do you do for your healthcare? So there's three different options and you can mix and match. But before we get into those three options, let's take a look at the first two questions that come up most often. Now, the first question that comes up a lot is American citizens asking, can I use my Medicare in the Philippines? And the unfortunate answer is no. Medicare is designed and authorized to be used within the United States. So you won't be able to check yourself into a hospital in the Philippines and charge it to your Medicare. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and again, you can just keep this in mind as an option depending on your situation, but Medicare is accepted in several U.S. territories. Now, those would be Puerto Rico, Guam, and U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and then I don't know how many of you ever get out to the Northern Mariana Islands, but the one that sticks out really is Guam. If you don't have an emergency, you could book a flight, fly over to Guam, and use your Medicare there. Now, I would not recommend relying on this if your biggest concern is that you have heart issues or extreme back spinal problems. The last thing you're going to want to do or have time for is to book a flight, wait around in the terminal, fly, land, do that whole routine to get to the hospital if you're in great pain or you need treatment immediately. So to answer that question, Medicare, no, not available in the Philippines. You either can consider Guam or flying back to the United States. The second most asked question is, again, from American citizens asking if there are VA veterans hospitals available in the Philippines. Now, the short answer to that is no. Not like the VA hospitals that you will find in the United States. There is only one location in Manila which has the Manila VA Outpatient Clinic. Now, that clinic, as its name implies, is for outpatient services. The other thing to keep in mind is that they are only authorized to treat medical conditions that you incurred during active duty. So let's say you were around a lot of explosions and you lost your hearing in one ear and you were having continual problems or needed a new hearing aid, whatever, you could go to the VA outpatient facility clinic and you could be seen based on your veterans benefits. But even though you are a veteran, if you suddenly came down with bad symptoms due to diabetes 15 years after your discharge from the military, that will not be treated at the Veterans Clinic. Now, if you were to come down with a serious need for treatment that involved more than what the outpatient clinic could handle, the Veterans Administration will coordinate hospital care with a nearby hospital and cover it as part of your VA benefits to treat, again, an ailment or symptoms that were incurred during your active duty. But it is beyond the scope of the clinic, and so the clinic will work in cooperation with the nearest hospital there in Manila to take care of your needs. As a side note, you may want to ask the VA clinic in Manila if this also includes any ongoing treatment for PTSD that was incurred during active duty. There may be services that are available to you, whether it be counseling or anything else, based upon the fact that it was, again, incurred during your active duty time. So that addresses the two most often asked questions. So now the third most often asked question I get is, well, what do you do, speaking of me personally, for your health needs being as how I've lived in the Philippines since 2012. Now, there are three options you have, and as I mentioned before, you can mix and match based on your situation, your need for medical care. So what are those three things? The first option is to self-insure. And this is my own personal recommendation. You do what you feel comfortable with, but I recommend that you have at least $10,000 set aside in an account that you don't need for your monthly budget. That $10,000 can just sit there as an emergency medical fund. Now, you could also possess a credit card, maybe two credit cards that have $10,000 worth of available credit. And again, don't use those cards. Leave them available to cover medical expenses should they come up. Now, you might think $10,000 is not a whole lot of money when it comes to medical care, but in the Philippines, it'll handle most of the non-major issues that you will face. So if you're looking at, say, your wife having a baby, or if you're looking at a broken leg, in my own case, I've had two surgeries in the Philippines. One of them was an appendectomy. The other was a hernia surgery. Each one involved several days of stay in the hospital, as well as the surgeon's fees, the hospital fees, the medications. And in each case, the whole ball of wax, when it came time for me to leave the hospital, the bill was just under $3,000 US. So I paid them cash and I was on my way. So self-insuring is an option if you're looking at covering what I consider medium grade issues. Anything from a broken arm to a surgery like I just described. Now, the second option you may want to consider is getting PhilHealth. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, PhilHealth, it's not available for foreigners, or PhilHealth isn't reliable, PhilHealth this, PhilHealth that. Well, all I can tell you is PhilHealth is available to a foreign national, which you would be in the Philippines. You will have to wait until you get your ACR card from immigration. You apply and pay for that on your 59th day of stay. Usually it takes them anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks to actually produce your card, and then you go pick it up at immigration. Once you have this ACR card, you can then go to PhilHealth and apply for PhilHealth insurance. So many have asked, well, do I need to be married to a Filipina in order to sign up for PhilHealth? No, you can just go ahead and apply as a foreign national. Now, there are two different plans, basically. One is a very basic plan, and to me, it just seems so inexpensive, you may as well get it. The first basic plan comes to roughly $350 a year. So you really can't beat it. Now, is it comprehensive coverage? No, but it will take the edge off. Again, depending on what it is you're going into the hospital for, there's varying coverages with this basic plan. Now, PhilHealth also has a more comprehensive plan. The premium is primarily based on a percentage of your declared income. This is a 5% calculation on your declared income, and there is like a max to it. The maximum contribution for your premium, 60,000 pesos a year. Now, keep in mind, the exchange rate will fluctuate a little bit year to year, but a 60,000 peso premium for the higher level coverage with PhilHealth still comes to roughly $1,100, which is still a pretty good deal compared to insurance premiums in Western countries. Now, when you're applying, it really is a paperwork transaction. You're not going to need to go through a physical in order for them to determine your premium. As I mentioned, most of the determination of your premium per month is going to be based on 5% of your declared income. So don't worry about that you need to get any kind of physical or anything in order to get the PhilHealth insurance. Now, this brings us to the third option, which is to go online, or you can look in the link that I have here in the video, in the description, as well as the top comment. You can check into actual Expat Health Insurance. There are lots of companies which specialize in providing health insurance for long-term expats. Now, with these companies, you're going to get a more comprehensive spectrum of coverage, but you're also going to pay a bit more than you would pay with PhilHealth. So this is where your budget kind of comes into play. Now, as far as cost with an actual expat health insurance company, I really can't give you any ballpark estimates because your age, your smoking, drinking habits, your pre-existing conditions, all of those will come into play with many of them. So you may be looking at a much higher premium, anywhere from $200 to $300 a month. Again, you won't really know until you apply with them and get a personal evaluation on what your premium would be. Now, what I do is I combined the first two options. I have money set aside for my wife and I, self-insuring. We have the money there that we do not spend. We don't need it for our month-to-month expenses or budget. It is just sitting there just in case either of us should need any kind of medical care. If the need arises, we go to the hospital. Most hospitals will admit you with a $500 deposit. You can do that $500 deposit with the hospital using a debit card or a credit card. Now, the other half of what we do is with PhilHealth. And that's just to kind of, as I said before, just to kind of take the edge off, to just kind of bring down the expenses a little bit, especially if it were to be something that would be really comprehensive. Something like spinal surgery, brain surgery, cancer, heart stents, something major. And for that reason, PhilHealth is there to kind of take the edge off with that. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what's available, what's not available. If money is not an issue for you, then maybe you would feel most comfortable having a very comprehensive line of coverage for health insurance using an expat health insurance company. That really is the safest way to go, although it is going to be a little pricier than PhilHealth. I would also recommend having at least some kind of insurance if you don't have at least $10,000 on standby for a medical emergency. And to put an even finer point on it all, if you're thinking of moving to the Philippines, barely getting by on $800-900 a month with no savings, no access to a credit card, no health insurance, I highly advise you do not move to the Philippines or anywhere overseas under those conditions, because eventually your luck can run out. It could be a motorcycle accident. You could be crossing the street and get hit by a tricycle. You could be walking in the mall, trip down the escalator, slip on a slippery floor. You could get food poisoning from some vendor or even a restaurant. And if that happens and you have no plan in place, you have no money set aside to go to the hospital and get care, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So have a plan, put it in place, and you'll be doing yourself a huge favor.